Here's the economic reality. Competitors in an ecosystem usually exert market pressure on one another. In the case of this console thing, I've noticed something. Whenever you say PlayStation has ported games to Nintendo and also ported games by using other, publishers to Xbox, people will say things like, well, it's not the same thing. Or if you say Xbox is multi-plat and is pushing its games on PC and PlayStation and Nintendo, while PlayStation is pushing its games to PC and Nintendo, they'll say, well, it's not the same thing. Xbox is a full third party and, PlayStation isn't, because PlayStation doesn't consider Nintendo as a competitor, which is an economic fugazi. You'll even see it in this interview here, where Colin Moriarty and Shuhei are talking, and Shuhei does say that most PlayStation players don't perceive Nintendo as a competitor or a threat in a sense. But Colin is also saying that he's excited that PlayStation games will go to Nintendo because, yes, there's this notion out there that's prevalent that, they don't really see Nintendo as this competitor. I say that it is absolutely inaccurate. Both of these companies provide video games. They're indirect competitors in one way, and in some cases, they do provide some level of very intense competition. They both sell console hardware, handheld hybrid in the case of Nintendo, static in the case of PlayStation, which is a direct competitor. I don't see anybody who can actually try to tell me that that's not the case. They both provide what they call proprietary software, and then at the same time, they provide online services and other things that basically have overlap. Now, here's the thing. There are people who are saying that this is actually how PlayStation perceives Nintendo. Arvon, shout out to you, but I have to say, I don't think that your position on this is accurate, and I'll show you why. Because you're going to make this case, and then I'm going to make the opposing case, and we're going to find out that your argument's not going to hold. Instead, what we need to do, you and I, is we hold true to the real economic position of PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox as competitors in some right. Let's start with number one, what you said. You said, I think this interview shows what's kind of obvious. PlayStation does not see Nintendo nor PC as competing platforms. I don't care how they see Nintendo or PC. They both have some level of competition that they exert on the market. You then said Xbox and PlayStation are direct competitors. And then you said everybody knows this. Well, not everybody does. And I'll show you something you said. You said Nintendo cut out of the market segment back in GameCube days. Not true. Not true. So I replied and said PlayStation sees Xbox as a competitor to Google and Apple in the mobile space. Does that mean that they're indirect competitor? That their indirect competitors aren't competitors? And you said this. You said they are competitors, of course, but not direct ones. They don't see putting a children's game into a direct competitor, which is a large younger player base, harmful to their platform market share. That's not true. You may say that it's a platform for a young player base, but what is Astrobot? Somebody please help me explain. You said same with their launching games on PC with a delay. They're launching day and dates with their live service games, and they also launched Lego, a child game, on PC. You said if not, it's going to eat into their console market share. They already did it. But in their games on Xbox will eat into their share for sure. You don't have to be a genius to know this. Then I replied and said, what they see and don't see doesn't matter. The next time they see a Zelda game arriving, they'll run far away. This is based on the fact that Horizon Zero Dawn got bodied by Zelda Breath of the Wild. So Arvons, you said this. What they see is the only thing that matters when it comes to launching a game in another platform. And to that, I say that is not true. Why? Because Xbox doesn't consider Sony and Nintendo main rivals. Now, that's what Phil Spencer sees. February 2020. This article out of Den of Geeks says Xbox boss doesn't consider Sony and Nintendo his main rivals. Instead, when he talks about this here, this is before Activision Blizzard and Bethesda was acquired. He said, when you talk about Nintendo and Sony, we have a ton of respect for them. But we see Amazon and Google as the main competitors going forward, says Spencer in an interview with Protocol. Shout out to an audience member who actually went ahead and pointed this out just a few minutes after you had said this. And he said, hold on. I think it's somewhere here, and I can show it here in the comments. He said, didn't, Xbox say something along the lines of this? And I went and I was like, I've actually heard people say this before. And then I found it and I was like, oh yeah, this statement. And like his reason for thinking, this way, are tied to cloud computing, which Microsoft has been working on for years, called Project Azure. Microsoft's Azure-powered xCloud service, which can stream Xbox One standard games onto your phone, is already at the stage of having a technical preview test. As Spencer explained, that's not to disrespect Nintendo and Sony, but the traditional gaming companies are somewhat out of position. I guess they could try to recreate Azure, but we've invested tens of billions of dollars in cloud over the years. So, if I were to follow Phil Spencer's statement here, Arvons, would you agree that your statement has to be treated the same way as Phil Spencer? Because if we go by only what Phil Spencer sees, then we'd make the exact same conclusion. But I say in this regard that Phil Spencer also is technically incorrect, just as Shuhei, you, and Colin Moriarty are technically incorrect. But also there's some layer of y'all being technically correct as well, because their competitive edge is indirect in some cases and direct in some other cases, regardless of what they see. Why? They're both all pulling in ways to try to get money out of your pocket. So again, these companies just use that as a groundwork to be able to go ahead and do what it is that they want to do and say what it is that they want to do. Aren't you all surprised that Phil Spencer had already been saying stuff like this almost 5 years ago? No, actually 5 years ago. Are you guys shocked? Are you guys now looking at Project Latitude, seeing how the groundwork had already been laid for them to have the contingency when it was imperative for them to go ahead and launch their games on other platforms? Do y'all see that the business proposition and the view of how the market was already shifting was a reality when they were about to launch the new consoles? And Xbox already knew in its back pocket, if push came to shove, we are going into PlayStation's lair and we are going to sell games, because we done told you already, we do not consider them as a competitor. Even though I disagree, don't get me wrong, but now people want to go in and say, oh, well, PlayStation fans don't perceive Nintendo. Well, Phil doesn't consider PlayStation as a direct competitor. So I guess we should basically stop talking about this now, right? We should stop, right? Oh, okay. But I'm sure you would disagree, because you would want for me to actually believe Shuhei and Colin, while I do not believe Phil in what he said. This is why we must not necessarily only hold to what is being said, but look at the market from that perspective. He even said this. He said, I don't want to be in a fight over format wars with those guys, Nintendo and Sony, while Amazon and Google are focusing on how to get gaming to 7 billion people around the world. Ultimately, that's the goal, Spencer added. He's referring, of course, to the fact that these tech companies are throwing big money into development, into developing the world of gaming at the moment. Google Stadia, a cloud gaming service that can stream games to your TVs, phones, tablets, and computers, is a prime example of the sort of rival product that Spencer is aware of. Additionally, apparently Spencer implied that Microsoft is willing to cooperate with Nintendo and Sony on initiatives like allowing games on the various company systems to play with and against one another. Despite the fact that these three companies have long been considered rivals, it seems like there may be more collaboration between them as the gaming industry grows and changes to incorporate more technological challengers. Now, here's another crazy thing. When Insomniac's leak happened in 2023 or so, PlayStation, in a sense, considered Xbox as somewhat this same kind of business. Which is weird, because a lot of people tried to deny this particular, document that Jez Corden published on his article, where he titled, Microsoft could disrupt and threaten PlayStation's business. Sony's Xbox fears laid bare in massive hack. When we read through this piece of like a presentation of some sort, you see that they write, in addition, Microsoft is building a mobile gaming store to compete with Apple and Google. This is not even talking about the Stadia thing. Stadia had already shut down by this time. Xbox had already bodied, I guess they didn't necessarily go head to head. Stadia didn't even, stay on the, afloat for long. But here's something that PlayStation says. They said this when they talked about Microsoft, which can supply multi-game subscription, console, games on PC, and, all their infrastructure. They said Sony's pillars are behind and already dated and behind the competition. So their competitive relationship is actually fluid to them when it's convenient for them. This is all of them, by the way. Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation, when they want to make some significant changes. And guess who's been talking about how this other platform is not really a threat to them? It's Totoki. He's now coming to PC and saying things. This is the December 11 publication where he said, PlayStation is facing no threat of users switching to PC, says Sony. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest with how the market is going. Let's not start throwing these qualifiers when we all know that if a video game comes out on Nintendo and a video game comes out on PlayStation, if you have limited resources, you'd have to consider which game you want to buy. That's competitive pressure. It doesn't have to be that they're both on the same console. What kind of school are we going to now have to, kick off with that kind of a, qualifier? Any school of economics would laugh at that kind of a proposition. Write that to any economics professor and then see them laughing you into oblivion and give you a freaking F on your paper that you come up with that proposal. Because in economics, the very first few things that anybody actually has to learn are things like scale of preference, opportunity costs, which pretty much shows the limitation of the consumer and how the consumer prioritizes their needs, their wants, and their necessities, and then any extra revenue that they have into other things. Because of limitations of resources, the consumer has to make choices that are actually beneficial for them. With this in mind, there is no doubt that PlayStation, Steam, Nintendo and Xbox all have some kind of a competitive pressure that they do share against each other. It's just that simple. Now, whether direct or indirect will be very, very interesting because it will be based on some individual bases. A few things here will be direct, a few things here will be indirect, but let's not be fooled. They're all sitting there asking you for your monies. And whoever you give your money wins the competition at any given time. That's what competition is. Talk to me in the comment section, folks. Thanks for watching the video. Peace out.